This episode of the Tactics Meeting is brought to you in part by Gallagher Marine Systems. Gallagher Marine Systems is the industry's most comprehensive source of full-service, in-depth compliance support. And by Portage Bay Solutions, makers of Easy 213. They have been helping a variety of firms in our industry with custom application and database development for close to 15 years. It's time for the Tactics Meeting, the program where we talk to subject matter experts about response tactics and technology. And today I am really excited to have Roger LaFerriere, Captain, United States Coast Guard retired, one of the really history makers of oil spill response over the last 20 years. Roger, welcome to the program.
Well, hey, it's my pleasure, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a thrill. I watched you from afar during Deepwater Horizon as I warmed a chair in operations, and in preparing to talk to you, I've gone back and watched your TED Talk and your historic C-SPAN interviews. As a matter of fact, for a 300 class I'm getting ready to put together, there's a couple of clips of you talking about community engagement, and one talking about how, make no mistake, the Coast Guard is in charge. I have 51% of the vote, so when I do my unified command talk, I'm grabbing that clip. So you're going to live forever.
Very good. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. And Randy Ashmore wanted me to call you AST-01. So your call sign.
Yeah, he came up with a comms program, and when I was with the strike team, 01's the CO, and he was 13, which 10 was the bosun mate department, and he was third, one down, and he kept going with it, and so that's what we call each other, 13 and 01.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's start by hearing about you. I know that Deepwater Horizon was kind of the pinnacle of your oil spill career, but that's not how it started. So can you give us a little background about how you came into the Coast Guard and how you came to be in the oil spill response business?
Yeah, I started out, I went to the University of Massachusetts in Lowell. My degree was in environmental science, and I lived in Lowell, Mass. We had at one time, the largest Superfund site in the nation. And a lot of us were, in those neighborhoods that were contaminated, and greatly, impacted me. And I said, I'm going to do something about this eventually. So actually was involved in a protest, led a protest against that. And as I graduated, I thought, okay, what is it I want to do? And I took a graduate course, and I heard about this National Strike Force the Coast Guard had, which is basically a pollution SWAT team, oil, chemical, weapons of mass destruction. And I said, man, I want to do that. So I did work in the industry for a couple of years, and until I could apply. And once I applied, went to my interview, and I said, that's what I want to do. And I said, great. And right out of headquarters, it was 1987. Coast Guard was in a lot of budget problems, and so a lot of us went to staff jobs. And I chose to go to headquarters in Washington, D.C. under the pollution response program, and was involved in Exxon Valdez. Did a couple of flights out there, but came back and debriefed some very senior personnel in the government. So from there, went to New Jersey, and Puerto Rico. Was involved in Hurricane Hugo, Vista Bella major oil spill, and then moved from there and went to the strike team in New Jersey. Lots of oil spills and responses there. And then moved on to graduate school, got my industrial hygiene master's degree. And then from there, I went to EXO Toledo, Coast Guard Marine Safety Office Toledo. Went back to the strike team as a commanding officer, and then went to Sector Honolulu, was involved in an earthquake, some volcano issues there. And then, but during my CO, then I went from there to graduate school for Marine Corps War College, which I thought I would never use, Dan, but I did during Deepwater Horizon. And then Captain Port in Los Angeles, Long Beach, and that's when I was called out to go to the Deepwater Horizon case. So that's it in a nutshell. But I've always had a passion for the environment, still do, and will defend it as much as I can. That people allow me to. So
you kind of got tapped to Deepwater Horizon the same way Eisenhower got tapped tapped to go to Europe.
yeah,
Like, here's the
yeah,
guy.
yeah. I did. I was yeah, I was Captain Port, and the largest command on the West Coast. And I remember my boss telling me, "You're not going anywhere." And I said, "Man, this is a Super Bowl of oil spills. I need to be there." But I never told him that. But one day I got a call from um, Captain Richard Hooper, who's a friend of mine, and he said, "Hey, we need you down here." And I said, "I can't go anywhere. Boss won't let me." And he said, "Do you want to go?" And there was a pause. I didn't want to say anything, but he knew. The next thing you know, I got orders to head out there. So
Oh, that's really cool. So what about the Marine Corps War College course did you use for Deepwater Horizon?
yeah, so it's interesting. When I got there, I did sort of a strategic analysis, which is what I learned from the War College, and I kind of stepped back and I said, "What's going on here?" And it was like a political insurgency. You had the people who were really upset at what was going on. Um, I mean, angry. I mean, right out angry with the federal government and BP. And then you had sort of some misalignment with the government, with the parish presidents down there and the governor. And there's something that they call the Clausewitz Triangle. So von Clausewitz was a Prussian general in the 1800s, late 1800s, and he wrote a book called On War,
I have
which
three copies. I have
oh,
three
do you?
copies, and
You
so
know?
I do, and I actually have a really nice 3-volume published edition that I found that I like very much, and then I have another one that's annotated. So
Really?
I have Clausewitz on the shelf. I have Moltke on the shelf.
Yep. Yep.
I'm reading right now a history of the German General Staff.
Oh, yeah, I love history, especially, believe it or not, German general staff history. World War II, mostly World War One, but
Yeah, me too.
yeah.
Me too.
So you're familiar with the Clausewitz Triangle, then?
I am.
Yeah, the people and the military and the government all have to be in alignment, right? So, of course, the military in this situation was us, the Coast Guard BP. We had all the Army, Navy, Air Force resources to fight this oil spill. Using a simile, obviously. But what we didn't have was alignment with the government, and we didn't have alignment with the people. So without that, Clausewitz will tell you it's a failure every time. And you could see that during the Vietnam War, where we didn't arm the people, and so we didn't have the support of the people in the North or the South. But so I kind of took that and I said, you know what, that's what I got to focus on. I got to focus on trying to regain the trust of the government there and also to win the hearts and minds of the people. And I wasn't really. We had everything we needed to respond to the spill, as you were there. But we had a number of vessels, largest armada ever to sail the oceans in the world. So over 6,000 vessels. And, it was bigger than D-Day. But what we didn't have was that alignment with the state government, local governments, and people.
Right. I mean, clearly your job as the federal government's incident commander was not tactical for the oil spill, right? The oil
Right.
spill was being cleaned up,
Yes.
right? There was a lot of experience, there was a lot of equipment.
Right.
You had an operations section chief, they were doing tactics.
Yes.
Your
Absolutely.
your job was different. How would you sum up what you I mean, this is the biggest oil spill in US history. I don't know if it's the biggest oil spill in the world,
Yeah. I
because
don't know.
I think there've been some bigger what we just don't hear about some of the
Right.
international ones,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
but you're walking in the door into what is arguably a shit show.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
and it's not that the dispersant aircraft aren't flying, or that in situ burning isn't happening, or I mean,
Right.
in those early days, there was at least one day when we dropped like 30,000 gallons of dispersant in
Yes.
24 hours. I mean, we were
Right.
flying sorties. The Air Force was landing their C-130s on the tarmac, leaning on the brakes, and
Yeah.
wheels down to wheels up was like 20 minutes.
Right.
I mean, it's like
Right.
Vietnam for them, right? So stuff was happening, right? And
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I've always felt like the movie I want to see about Deepwater Horizon isn't the movie that we saw,
No. No, I
right?
agree.
And I didn't. I waited like 10 years to watch that movie. I didn't want to watch it, but
Yeah,
um,
me too.
it's the story of the work that was done in Houston to cap
Yes.
that weld. I think that
Yes. Yes.
Ron Howard should direct that, and it would be the equivalent of Apollo 13.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, that was an engineering feat. I don't think people realize that. I mean, I used to get this, why can't, we can put a man on the moon. Why can't we do this? I said, there's no way a man could survive down there
Right.
with
Five.
anything we had.
Yeah. I mean, do you have any idea what the pressure is? You can't even send a
Yeah.
U.S. Navy boomer down there. They can't go that deep, right? It just
That's
can't
right.
be done, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, my first day was a challenge. I just was in Rapid City, South Dakota, doing a mass casualty conference, and I had to talk about game day leadership. And my first day was probably the hardest day in my Coast Guard career. I know I showed up, and one of the things that happened. I mean, the very first day, I went to a meeting, and with the Government Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness folks. It's basically emergency managers for each of the parishes there, and they just unloaded. I mean, they were screaming and yelling, all these accusations, and I was stunned. I had never walked into a situation like that, and I said, "Please give me the opportunity to try." And they all stormed out of there except for one woman. And I said, "What can I do to work with these people? Because I need them. We can't do this without them." And she was kind enough to set up a private meeting between myself and them, and we were able to work out something. And then I had a press conference, and I had a young lieutenant who was supposed to put media bullets together, and I show up and he didn't have the media bullets ready, which I instantly fired him on the spot. But I mean, you can't walk into any meeting with all the major networks and not be prepared, right? So,
Right.
so that was
Right.
interesting. But yeah, it was an interesting day. I know a number of other things that happened. This kind of blew my mind, but um, I got through it. And then, like I said, like I tell people, that was the worst day of my Coast Guard career, but it was the beginning of the best moments I've ever had in my career.
What were you thinking as you were on the plane flying from Los Angeles to Louisiana, getting ready? I mean, you've got game day leadership in your mind, and you're
Right,
thinking, I'm going to walk in the door, and there are going to
right.
be some first words that come out of my mouth, and that is going to make or break how this day is going to go. What were you thinking?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. And then, so what I did, Dan, was I kind of sneaked in the night before. So I showed up in my civvies. It was very late in the evening. I did that purposefully. And I just wanted to walk around and see what things were going on. I was talking to people, wasn't in uniform, and they didn't know who I was at the time. But I say, "Hey, how's it going?" I go into ops, and they tell me it was the Charlie Foxtrot, and then I'd go into another place, and what are you doing? And I think it helped me the next day because I was familiar with the whole outlay, and I heard some people, and then riding to the incident command post and back and listen to radio stations and news stations talk about how badly it was being run. I knew I had something in for myself. So I was prepared. And the next day I came in, I said, these guys need some positive inspiration. They were very depressed about not making any headway. They were, everything in the news was negative. And of course, the BP folks had 11 of their folks die. And they were getting double, you know, beat over the head. One was because they lost their comrades. And the second one was the media wasn't giving any slack. So I knew I had to kind of lift people back on their feet, and get them charged up, and then at the same time work on those things I mentioned before, by taking care of the media and the press and the government and the locals. Yeah.
So
So
you did a little recon,
yeah, yeah,
not unlike Henry V, uh,
really.
the night before Agincourt, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, I'm familiar with that battle. I didn't know he did that. That's great.
Well, he did it in Shakespeare's play. I don't know that he did it in
Yeah,
real life, but
yeah,
in the
yeah,
in the play, he dressed as a common soldier and sat at the fire and
yep,
walked
yep.
amongst the troops,
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly what I did. And I had a badge. I told them not to put captain on it, and that way people wouldn't know who I was. So that was great. I'm glad I did
Okay, well that was a
it.
plan that you had made as you were flying in. This is what I'm going to
Yeah,
do,
yeah, absolutely. I said I got to get in there, and I'm gonna go. I could have slept in, but I was like, I want to get there, see what the command post looks like, and talk to the people on the ground that were working the night shift and see how things were going. Now there were a few people there that recognized me, and I go, shh, 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 don't let them know I'm here. But I had an opportunity to talk to those folks as well, and then sit down, what's going on, and a lot of them are shaking their heads. A lot of them are very disappointed and saying this is like we're learning the Valdez lessons all over again.
right?
And so a lot of frustration. And you knew this too. We were doing a lot of things that were very similar to what was happening in Valdez. So the bad things.
Right. Well, what do you think the what do you think the bad things were at the beginning of Valdez? What are the things that stand out to you that we should have learned but we haven't seemed to learn?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, you talk about tactics. I mean, one of the things I mean we learned in Valdez, you just can't pressure wash the hell out of the rocks there and the environment. I mean, and that's what was going on up there, and a lot of the, local shoreline was destroyed and still trying to recover from that years and years later, and I was sort of seeing that, in Deepwater, marshes were being cut and being destroyed, and, when they didn't really have to be, and so that was like, "Oh, no, why are we doing that?" And, and just, tearing up the shorelines in places where, you and I grew up in a world where no action was an environmental benefit, right? So if we took no action, it was better for the environment than it was if you took action. And the reasoning by that was that we caused more harm if we didn't intervene. And secondly, Mother Nature had a better shot at cleaning it up than we did. So that was disheartening, seeing a lot of that happening.
Yeah, I saw that during the new Carissa. We were out there walking the beaches, picking up oil
Yeah.
for a couple weeks, and then uh, a big Pacific storm rolled through and basically pressure washed the beach. And when that storm was gone, there's like nothing left. I'm like, well, okay then.
Right.
Should have ordered that up a while ago.
Right. Exactly. Yep. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So you have a master's degree in industrial hygiene. To what extent did that environmental background play a role in how you approached what was going on in Deepwater Horizon?
Yeah, so after I got my degree, I ended up going back to headquarters at the pollution office, and I worked on a couple of things. One was, I wrote the Coast Guard Standard Incident Action Plan, Site Safety Plan. That's I believe still being used, and that was purposely designed to be in compliance with OSHA, 1910-120 hazardous response operations regulations to ensure folks were safe. So I was happy to, I worked with a lot of industry folks and a lot of EPA and so on and so forth. And the other thing I designed, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, a thing called the SMART protocol,
Yes.
especially, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
special monitoring of applied response technologies, which was a monitoring protocol for dispersants and also in situ burning. And again, I worked with all kinds, EPA, NOAA, and scientists basically, and we put that together. And I think some people might not realize that we probably wouldn't have been able to do in situ burning or apply dispersants in the Gulf if it weren't for that protocol. And it's not just me; it's a credit to everybody else who was on that committee to make that happen. So So what was neat was I got to see that stuff in action. I was really excited to see that we were able to use all the weapons in our arsenal, right, during that spill. You mentioned the fires. I mean, incredible amount of burning, and we burnt more oil, and I think during that spill than was spilled in a lot of major oil spills. And then, of course, the dispersants was really effective in putting the oil in the water column for natural oil-eating bacteria to take care of and prevent a lot of oil from coming ashore and killing thousands of shorebirds. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, it's really. I remember, I forget his name, the guy at Exxon who was in charge of dispersants. Um,
Oh man,
who
yeah,
was who's one of the guys who helped design the corrects it. Um,
yes,
he said, you know, uh, the situation is bad, and you know we can use dispersants to make it less. We're not going to make it good, but we can make it less bad, right?
yeah,
And
exactly,
it
yeah,
and it's really about objectives, because the dispersants help disperse it into the water column and allow for natural mitigation. But
yeah,
for me, like out in Hawaii, where we pre-approve for dispersants at the offshore mooring, it's about keeping the oil off the beach, right? That's the
yes,
goal. That's the objective, right?
right,
And
right,
so is dispersing the oil into the water column good? No. Is it better than having the oil on the beach? Yes. Right. It's
yes,
about choices.
right, exactly,
Right.
right, making the best choice you can.
Right. And then you did in the end get a lot of pushback on dispersants. What was the,
Yes,
you tell me how, I mean, it almost seemed like about week 3 when the media is pushing back on dispersants, like the EPA is like, yeah, dispersants, never heard of them. So, I mean, they're part of the
yeah, yeah,
RT, right? They approve the use of
yeah,
dispersants.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
then
it was
later the
interesting.
EPA seemed like they didn't, like, what the hell?
Yeah, it's like all the planning and all the efforts and years of trying to test and develop and redesign port exit to get it to the point where it's least toxic as possible. That went out the window. And I was known as the dispersant devil. I got all kinds of hate email and threats, and when I went around the community, they said, "There's a dispersant guy." But I kind of, said, I had to do what I had to do. But yeah, it seemed like you had some folks in EPA, including the administrator, very unfamiliar with the EPA. We had a approval list, as you know, Section J on of the National Contingency Plan requirements, which approved all these things ahead of time so we could use them. But I think you ended up having a lot of folks in the upper echelons of EPA, and including those folks in the region that were just unfamiliar with dispersants and the trade-off you mentioned, the trade-off decision, right? Sometimes you have to sacrifice one battle line so you can use another battle line, kind of trick the enemy and get the incident taken care of. So it was frustrating. I mean, it was really, really frustrating. And but we got to continue to use them, but the protocol to get it approved was much, much more difficult. So
When it was initially used, I mean, it's pre-approved in the Gulf, right?
right,
You didn't have to go to the RRT for approval initially.
right, right.
Did you have to get RRT approval later?
No, I mean, I was using it, and what we do in the morning is first of all we would do overflights out, right? Make sure the ocean was susceptible. You can't have heavy waves or stuff like that. We would go out to the area, we'd apply, we'd do a recon, and we'd have kind of a report back, make sure there's no sea life in the area, no whales or turtles or things like that, and then make sure the wind was low. All these factors, that come into play in making that decision. And then would come back to the dispersant operations group, and then they would say, "Hey, Captain." It had to be approved by me initially, incident commander. I said, "It looks like we're good, and what do you think?" And I'd say, "Let me consult with my, key stakeholders." That was NOAA and EPA. And so one day I couldn't get a hold of EPA. We were losing that window. And so I said, "Let's go. We're going to do it." And that didn't go over well. So they bumped it up to the area command. And, it took a lot longer to get those approvals. And some days we missed that window of opportunity,
So
unfortunately.
in the end, you had to approve it every day.
Oh yeah, every day it had to be approved, and I said, listen, because I believed in it so much, as you said. I think we'll never know how many shorebirds it saved, but it would have saved thousands, is what the scientists, tens of thousands, maybe even. And so it was something I said, hey, listen, if you guys are ready, you get a hold of me. I'll drop everything I do. It's an operational issue, and I'll make sure we get that decision quickly. So
Well, and I think you can't tell how much oil it kept off the beach. So
right,
how much did it prevent economic disruption for
yeah,
tourism and other things? I mean, there are so many things that happen once the oil gets into that near shore area.
yeah,
Um, I mean, just keeping it out of there,
yeah,
I think
exactly.
one of the better moves. I had Al Allen on the program
L. Allen, yes,
early on to talk about in situ burning,
yeah,
right? Because he invented some water cooled fire boom back in the
yeah,
day, and
that's right.
and he was really your guy for in situ
Yeah,
burning, right?
he was,
So
he was, yeah, yeah,
that yeah, I had a
he
great
was.
podcast with Al.
Yeah, great guy, awesome, expert in the
So
field.
yeah, no, he's I remember a class I took from him on estimating the volume of oil on the water based on aerial observation. And I walked into this classroom that had whiteboards all around the wall, and it was redone with nothing but trigonometry. And I'm like, this is not going to be a good day. It's not a good day. But he made it
Yeah,
really interesting. It was a good day. But
yeah, he
I was
was.
worried. I was very worried.
Yeah, you talked about earlier about my industrial hygiene degree. It's a science degree, but I was in an engineering group. But I was able to, it helped me to understand some of the LL and stuff, and I think that was helpful. But yeah, he was great.
Yeah, you have to have some, at least
Yeah.
enough to understand the language that's being spoken, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so you were also on the Tong Chang response out in Hawaii, right? And
Yeah, that's right.
that was a politically heated event,
Yeah.
right? Because that was
Yes.
a Chinese national vessel that wanted to come into U.S. waters. What was
Right.
your role? What was your role there?
Well, I was deputy, at the deputy sector commander, but the CO there was, he knew I had the background, so I kind of managed it. So in essence, I was, deputy and sector commander, but for the most part, he let me run the whole incident. But this vessel was destined to go to Cuba, and with ammunition on board. So, once we got finally get the details of that from the Chinese, it was, there was a lot of concern. Okay, what's in there? And of course, nobody could tell us. Nobody. It's not like the U.S. When you look at this freight ship, the containers are all in different locations. They're stacked differently. It's like, what's going on here? But yeah. So and they had to do force majeure because number one, cargo hold is full of water, and there was hazmat in there, and they were sinking. So they were trying to get into Honolulu for, so they could rescue the ship. So you had this stuff going on. They were leaking oil on top of that out of another tank, cargo tank. So it's like, what do we do? Do we bring this vessel in? There's a life safety issue on there. And, we originally 75 miles offshore. We sent a helicopter crew out there to kind of look and make sure they were okay. Some marine inspectors, to make sure we had some integrity, and then some search and rescue experts. And they came back and said, "Yeah, we got to bring this in, or else we're going to run into problems. This crew's going to be in trouble." So and of course, the White House was involved. I mean, it was that big of a deal because they were very concerned about these munitions. So you had
And
that kind
State
of dynamic.
Department, I'm sure, the State
Oh
Department,
yeah, yes,
National Security Advisor,
yes,
probably.
yeah, yeah, and because as you know, this who knows what was on board, right? So finally, the White House had an agreement with the Chinese that we would allow it to come in, but we wouldn't open the containers. Now, I don't know how that came, but we were sure it was not going that was going to be safe when it came in. course, you're thinking of all kinds of scenarios, right? A Tom Clancy nuclear, nuclear bomb kind of deal. But so it came in, and we kind of held it offshore. We were going to do all the pollution removal there, maybe about a mile and a half offshore. But then we had a storm coming in. It's just like everything, right? You
Yeah.
got Murphy shows up to everything. So a decision had to be made. Where do we take it? So we were going to take it to the west side of the island in Barbers Point, mooring area. And it was interesting because the naval architects had their programs and calculations, and they said we can't bring it in there. Can't bring it in there because it's too shallow. And so I talked to the pilot, which is the person that brings ships in, and I said, "Do you think we can bring it in?" He says, "Yeah, no problem." So there was this whole battle I was fighting. I knew pilots. I worked with them. I know you have
Yeah.
as a master of a vessel. And so I said, I trust this guy. He's putting his business on the line. And my CEO's like, oh, what do I do? Do I trust my deputy? Do it? And I said, I'll put my career on the line for this, which is what was really what it came down to. But long story short, they got it in there. And I was holding my breath a little bit, but they got it in there and we were able to offload it, and it was all good. So, and
Yeah.
the US government required that it be sent back to China. So the Coast Guard escorted it with this C-130 all the way to the Chinese international waters to make sure it went home. So, and not to
Oh,
Cuba.
wow. Wow. I
Yeah.
didn't, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was cool.
During that incident, you developed an IAP development, an incident action plan development checklist, a checklist that I recently used on one of our exercises as we attempted to really for the first time in our worst case drills produce and get approved an IEP within the exercise time frame, and we used
Yeah.
that, and it was really helpful. Tell me about what that checklist is about, and why you developed it.
Yeah. I was in Hurricane Katrina, and, it's just two parts to that. There was the search and rescue part, and then there was the oil spill part. And a lot of people don't realize that up to the time before Deepwater Horizon, it was the second largest oil spill in U.S. history. Valdez being the first, 8.4 million gallons they estimated, and seven different oil refineries. I mean, it was just a disaster. But we did these action plans, and I kept on getting these really, a subpar incident action plans as far as I'm concerned. The incident commander has to sign these, and he's putting his name on it. And the analogy I would make to people is, imagine if you were designing a chair, right? And you were selling this chair and it had a few marks on it, or, the legs were off. I mean, I wouldn't want that. I want the best product for it. And the other thing you mentioned is making it easier, for folks. So that checklist wasn't just mine, but I handed it to the plans chief. I said, I want you to use this. So by the time I get it, I can quickly review it and so on and so forth. But you want to have a product, that IAP goes out to everywhere. And the Forest Service has great ones. But, when that thing goes out, it's kind of really a product of the unified command. And if it's not right, or if there's misspellings or grammar, wrong forms, or inconsistent, it might lead people to believe, wow, things are not going well over there. Right. So anything that comes out of the command post has to be high quality. So yeah, that's kind of the reason why I did it. Really, to make it my life easier, and in the end, make sure we had a good product coming out the door.
Well, that's why we invent a lot of things, right? Because we want to
Right.
we want to make our lives easier. We put a lot of work into creating a better product because at the end of the day, I'm speaking for myself. I'm lazy, and I want the
Yeah,
next one to be as easy as possible. I
that's
w-
right. That's
when
right.
I was producing the IEP for the Genius Star 11, and I'm thinking, what software can I write, or what can I do to make this 204 development easier? Because I never want to hand write another 204 the rest of
No.
my life. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah,
And so I'm willing to put in a bunch of work ahead of time to make so it'll just spit something out that's useful. I mean, not
right.
I mean, and some software is useful and some software isn't. But
No, that's right.
I do want to ask you. I've recently changed my mind on this, but I'd like to get your opinion. I've said for a long time, you know what? I'm just going to stay in the 201 for the first 48 72 hours. I'm not going to rush into the planning process. And we do these worst case drills for state credit, and
Yeah.
we start with a canned 201 briefing, and we say we're going to get through a planning meeting by the end of the day. We try to cram all this into 8 hours, right? And
Yeah.
it's really unrealistic. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're not gonna do that.
Right.
But up at the Genius Star, we put together a pretty small IAP. I mean, it was a cover sheet. It was the 202, 202A, 202B,
Yeah.
three 204s, a 205, and a 207, and that was it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Sure.
that's what the unified command wanted, and we put
Yeah.
this together, and they signed it very quickly, and it led me to the idea that, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I want to go to an IEP as quickly as I can because that gets me the unified command signatures. It says, we, the unified command, approve of what's being done.
Yeah.
And I was talking to our good friend Randy Ashmore today, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Yes,
Randy.
well, we could put a signature page on the 201 to just say, hey, I've reviewed and approved the 201." I'd be interested. I'm catching you cold, flat-footed
It's
here,
all
but I'd
right.
be interested in your opinion on, you know, what you think on that kind of philosophy. Two
Yeah.
IEP, not an IEP.
Yeah, but I think you bring up a good point. I mean, I think it's important that the incident action plan is a good plan, right? That it's effective. I mean, I remember some guy saying to me one time, this was during the pipeline spill off the Houston River. I can't remember the name of that one. But he looked at me and he said, how is this? He never seen an IEP. How is this going to help me pick up oil? And it's always stuck with me. And it was an industry person. And I said, if this is not accomplishing the mission, then it's not a good incident action plan. And we don't want to rush it if it's not meeting our goal of accomplishing the mission. You know, we identify priorities, we identify objectives during the 201, and we put resources on there. But the 201 is really a reactive product, right?
Yep,
So we want
yep,
to get the head of the incident where we're using the tactics meeting, kind of planning ahead, so we can gain control of the incident rather than the incident control on us. So you want to get there as fast as you can, but not at the expense of confusing the mission. So I remember going to a spill on the Delaware River. I can't remember it now, but anyways, maybe you might remember it. Oh, the Athos one, and I was the deputy incident commander, and I got there, and the captain of port says, "Hey, you need to review this IAP for me." It was from the industry, and it was just, it's like the ore charts were wrong, and the 204s weren't assigned to anything. There wasn't any equipment there, and I told Captain, I said, "This is not going to work." And then he got us in the room with the planning chief in there, and he said he rolled up the IEP, and he said, "This isn't working." And he handed it to the industry guy, and he looked at me, and I said, "Look, we're going to get this right. We're going to work through the night and get it right because I do want to get there." And I think you have a good start, but it's not accomplishing the objectives of the mission. So you're right. Sometimes you got to be in that 201, and until you can really develop a good tactics meeting and a good plan, that's going to help you get ahead of the incident. So it's going to depend a lot of things, but I think that's the thing you have to think about. Is it if the IAP is not, the IAP could be detrimental if you're writing something that is not matching the tactics to the objectives. You may be causing some more problems than you are good, and the 2-on-1 might be more effective. But when you feel like you got everything, well, situation awareness, right? You got good situation awareness, you know your resources are where they're not, and then you feel like you can have a good tactics meeting, then you move forward. Now, during Hurricane Katrina, during the search and rescue part, we had IAPs, but sometimes you go into a tactics meeting and we get it done, and the next thing you know, somebody, is lighting fires in the middle of the city. Well, guess what? We're going to use the IAP from yesterday. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Because we can't develop a new one. Our tactics meetings just got blown out of the window with these new fires. So, Yeah, so you gotta be thinking, do you have the right information? Can you produce a quality product?
Up here in the Pacific Northwest, so one of my primary job is as the response manager for the Washington State Maritime Cooperative. So
Yeah, yeah.
we're a, are you familiar with WSMIC? We're
Yes,
a,
I am. Oh,
umbrella plan holder. So,
yeah,
MSRC is our OSRO, and we've done a lot of pre-planning in conjunction with the area plan so that we know what day one, day two, day three are really going to look like, right?
right,
And there
right,
might be exceptions, like we've had two major ship fires in Tacoma in the last 2 years, 3 years, which
right.
is a little bit
Oof.
different. But for
Yeah,
an oil
that is
spill, we know what we're doing, and it seems the approach that we took for the WSMIC worst case drill, and what allowed us to drive quickly towards an IEP is that we're really documenting what we've already planned to do. We know
yes,
what
right,
we're going to do.
right.
We really almost don't even need to go into a tactics meeting on day
Yeah,
one or day two to put
yeah,
out an
yeah,
IEP because it's done, right?
right.
What do you agree with that philosophy?
Yeah, I do. I agree with 100%. The current job I do, I do a lot of planning and a lot of drills and exercises. And I think, if you put the right information in your plans, you basically have an incident action plan. Too many times I see people kind of put those plans aside, and I'd come to an incident and I'd say, where's the area contingency plan or, MSRC plan? Where are those? And people would say, I don't know." Well, that's something bad, isn't it? Right? Because your plans will have all the staging areas and the logistics points and all the, identify all the contractors and the resources. So I think absolutely, I think you can operate from those plans if they're written well. The other thing I've done is, as we've had incidents, I'll take an incident action plan and I'll stuff it behind my plan, and say, hey, we're going to use this one for the next one, right? Hopefully
Right,
there's not a next one, but doesn't hurt to do that as well. So a lot of times people put these away or they get rid of them and they don't think about, maybe I can attach this to my contingency plan. And if we have another incident, we can use it. But no, I absolutely agree. Good plan. I mean, it's just like the thing about the planning process, as you mentioned, I mean, Eisenhower once said, the plan is nothing. The plan, planning is everything. So there's a lot of effort that goes into that plan. Way
that's
up
funny
front.
because I have a slide that says exactly that in one of my presentations. I use that quote all the time, all the
Yeah.
time.
Oh, I love that quote. I'm right with you there. But the reason being is what he's saying is that you got to build this plan with so many other folks. And so, the plans that you develop are involving so many people, much more than you would have at a tactics meeting or an incident action plan. So yeah, if you can, I absolutely think that's the way to go. If you have a good plan, start with that plan and then build the IEPs after that. The IEP is really going to do things. I look at it as like addressing the variables, right, that are not accounted for in a contingency plan. It's impossible to account for all the different variables that are out there, right? Like weather and sea state and things like that. So the contingency plan really should inform the IEP process, and the IEP should be looking at those variables really and taking care of the things you can't identify in your plan. I'm glad you used that quote. That's great.
No, it's a great quote. I think
Yeah.
what say because the planning process never ends, right?
Yes.
It's not
Right.
something that you do once and then you stop. It's an iterative process, and
Yes. Yes.
you may develop a plan based on it, but a little while later that plan has to change because your process has changed, or you've learned a
Right.
little bit more, or
Yep.
like me, you've
Yep.
gone to a new response and you're like, okay, maybe I'm going to change my opinion on how this
Yeah.
actually should go, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, that's the
So,
way to go.
um, is it you that developed the ICS 234?
Is that the action tracker?
No, not the action tracker. It's the one that
Oh, the work analysis. Yeah, the work
yeah, that goes
analysis.
from
Yeah.
objectives to strategies to tactics, right? That tries
Yeah,
to
that was
align unified command objectives and make sure that your strategies and tactics are
yeah.
aligning.
I helped review that, but that was developed by Commander Ron Canton. But I was the person that designed the action tracker.
Okay.
Uh, that is now part of the process. But yeah, I worked with Ron on that and EMSI, which is the ICS group, and I think it's one of the challenges we had, especially with the operations community and the Coast Guard. They like to look at other opportunities, right? What other things couldn't we be thinking about? Have we looked at all these possibilities? And when you look at normally at ICS, you have objectives and priorities, and boom, you're in the tactics, right? And like, how did you get there? Did you look at alternatives? And I think that really was the purpose of that forum, to look at different strategies and making sure you look at all the possibilities, COAs they call them, I think, in the military, courses of action. And that way, whoever's in charge knows that you've looked, okay, for this particular strategy, oil spill strategy, or, we're looking at, I mean, it's an oil spill incident. We're looking at dispersants. We're looking at in situ burning. We're looking at mechanical recovery, whatever it is, and then deciding on this tactic. So I think it's a great form in that respect.
Some some organizations, like California OSPR, consider it a mandatory form. You must
Ooh,
use it. You can't get credit for your exercise without it. What
wow.
what is your opinion on the form? Is it required? Is it a tool? I mean, ICS is supposed to be flexible, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah. I teach ICS 300 and 400 as you do, and what I've been doing lately is trying to get introduce people to the program. Recently did a 4-hour course for the American Biological Security Association. These are people that respond to biological incidents in laboratory environments. And when I introduce it, the thing that turns people off is the number of meetings and forums, right? And I always say you only use what you need. If all you need is a 202 and an action tracker, an action items list, just use that. Don't go through a tactics meeting if you don't have to, or if you do, you don't have to use a 215. So my opinion is you only use what you need. See, the forums are not the ends of the means, and you know this. The forums are not the ends of the means. Like, and a lot of these exercises, like, okay, our objective is to develop an IAP. No, that's not your objective. The objective is making sure you accomplish the mission of cleaning up oil, or firefighting, law enforcement, whatever you need to do. That should be the objective, and the forums get you there. So use only what you need is my thought.
uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm gonna be quiet for a minute and ponder that for a minute for
Yeah.
a minute. So
But, if you're dealing like and I have a second business, and I do some, coaching for some of the oil companies in California. So I know, the stress they have to go through. But I think it goes back to your plan, right? If you can develop a plan, I've helped review their plans. If you can develop a plan that already has a lot of that work analysis completed in it, then you don't have to sit there and scratch your head and slow up the process to get to the planning meeting. You can say, oh, look, we've already reviewed these different strategies for this scenario, so let's just take that work that we've done from the plan and put it in the work analysis you know
well, the approach that I recently took was to develop the 204s at the group and the branch level.
yes, yes,
And
absolutely.
I mean, I was always taught that every line item on the 215 became an individual 204. So I've
Right,
got I've got a 215 for the recovery group, and I'm going to do on water recovery. And in on water recovery, I'm going to have 10 task forces. They're all going to do exactly the same thing.
right, right.
Why write 10
Yes,
204s?
I'm with you 100%. Why do that? If 1 204 can accomplish that mission. I mean, during Deepwater Horizon, we had 75 215s. I counted them one day. 75. And we would go through when I decided to step in, and see what was going on from a tactical point of view as incident commander. They had one of those, PowerPoints you could slide, slide, and we went through 75. And we only identified the changes and things like that. But there was plenty of opportunities to say, hey man, maybe we can combine this with this, instead of
Right.
writing a 204 for every one of those. But if your 204 can accomplish the mission of many, many different units, why do separate ones? It really doesn't make sense. Now, the only time I would consider maybe that be different is if you had, the special instructions section is a good opportunity for safety to put something in there. So if let's say you had a strike team working over here and another one here, but they were working in different environmental situations or hazard situations, right? You might do out two separate 204s for that reason to make sure the special instructions identify those hazards and get them taken care of. But otherwise, why reproduce them? I'm with you. Only use what you need.
Only use what you need. I'm gonna write that. I'm gonna make a new slide. AS201. I'm gonna make a new slide.
And
Only.
that need is based on your mission, right? You got to go back to the objectives and priorities and I go back to that industry guy told me, how's this picking up oil? How is this going to help me picking up oil? And I think that'll always stick with me in a sense. Okay, what basically he's saying is, are we helping him accomplish his mission out in the field and taking care of the oil or whatever incident it was?
I'm
So
going to ask you to put your national contingency plan hat on. So
yeah,
I have found myself as the responsible party incident commander for two ship fires in the last 3 years. So we arrive and the municipal fire department is fighting this fire,
uh-oh.
and they consider it to be their scene. We have the federally required salvage and marine firefighting contractor either arriving or on scene. It started about 5 in the morning on a Saturday. By about 8 in the evening, with
Okay,
the hatches dogged down, that fire was out. I mean, we needed to sit there and cool fire boundaries and leave it buttoned up for 3 or 4 days while the temperatures came down,
right, right,
and
right.
and then decided that they would approach it like a structural fire,
Oh boy.
brought in blowers, opened the thing up, forced oxygen into it.
Oh no.
That's when the ship was lost. What is the Coast Guard's authority? I mean, I was there only because there was a risk of pollution, right? That's the only thing that gives
Yeah.
me a seat at the table. It's got 50,000 gallons of diesel fuel on board, and you're pouring water on it.
Yep.
And I'm
Yep.
afraid you're going to put the fire out in the traditional municipal firefighting way,
Right. Right.
sink the ship,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
You're going to
I
roll it
mean,
over.
yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, when I was captain of port in LA, we got a very strong relationship with our fire department. So we did a lot of drills, and so you know, I could imagine. Let's say one of my fire chiefs. First of all, he'd probably let me know, and we'd be standing shoulder to shoulder at the pier as we're discussing this. And I don't mean me necessarily, but my tactics guys. But the Coast Guard has the authority. I mean, as you know, they have this requirement. It's called the Super Six, and I'm sorry, I don't remember what that. But the Coast Guard has authority to control anything in the port. I mean, it's an amazing power. I could tell that ship go there. I can tell it shut down a particular part of the port and things of that nature. And I guess if I was in that situation as a captain of the port, I'd have serious conversation and go down there, talk with the fire chief, and let's work this out. And if we can't work it out, then you got to bring in the heavy horses and say, look, I'm bringing in the marshals. I'm bringing in the FBI. I'm bringing in folks in there because we have a requirement by law to do this. You have a requirement by law to do this. We got to do this right in the interest of making sure people are safe and protecting the environment. Now, you always have that strong-headed chief, right? I did an exercise up in Connecticut one time where the chief said, "This is my incident." It was just an exercise.
Mhm.
So I said, "Do you mind if I just come along?" I wasn't captain of the port. I was the head of the strike team, so I was a tactics guy. And I remember coming along and I said, "Chief, I'd like to help you out, but just let me help you out." Okay, all right, just don't get in our way. So we set up a situation unit. We started documenting all the resources where everybody was going, and it was a weapons of mass destruction incident. And you soon, suddenly realized, wow, these guys are helping out. But you want to build those relationships ahead of time, and it's unfortunate that happened. But I was also involved when I was operations down in sector Puerto Rico, sector San Juan. I was the port operations guy. We have a similar situation with the Sovereign of the Seas, which was a cruise ship fire. It was an electrical fire. And we show up, and the fire department wants to run in and douse it with water. And, we had a very stern captain of the port at the time, Charlie Bills. I think he works for Hornblower now. But Charlie, it's like, shows up, hey, listen, we're going to take care of this fire or resolve, the private.
Right.
And you're not going to go in there unless we tell you, well, I have jurisdiction. Well, let's form a unified command and let's work this out because that's required by law. It's not an easy. I'm making it sound a lot easier, but if I were there, you heard me speak. 51% of the vote. That was what the Coast Guard needed at the time. That's what the U.S. people needed to hear. I worked very closely with BP, but I said, look, you can't be in front of the camera anymore with me. You need to stay away. I need to reassert my 51% of the vote. And it'll help us all in the end, right? Because we've got this negative image of what's going on. But I would have taken charge and I would have gone down there. And if I had to call the marshals up and, you know, take that fire chief away,
Really?
if I have to, that's really going down the drastic road. But,
It is.
but you know, if you're looking at, yeah, or he could be liable,
I
if he
don't know that the
causes
Coast
harm.
Guard
Yeah,
I don't know that the Coast Guard, some of the people that are in those roles at the moment, I'm not sure they realize that they have that authority.
I think you're right.
I don't
Absolutely.
know that, they're like, "No, no, we can't interfere. We don't have authority here." I heard that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some of the fire chiefs do have authority, and might be in that region of the country that they have the primary authority to put out the fire. But, we also have an authority, and as you know, when you have that situation, you need to form a unified command, and hopefully you're going to get to a common solution. I think, I don't know. I wasn't there, so I can't
no, no,
say,
no,
but
no, of course not.
you know my leadership style. I mean, if I were there, I would have made this work. I mean, I would have said, guys, we got to make this work. Let's work together on this particular issue. And hopefully, I got one of you guys from the industry who know how to fight ship fires standing right at my side, and I'll say, hey, what do I need to tell this guy so that we do it the right way, right? So,
Right.
but I had
Uh,
no problem doing that at BP. I'd go, I'd fly in to parish and I'd say, what's going on? And the parish president would be bitching at me and hand me a bunch of 215s. And I said, fine, I'll take care of this. I'd go up there and I said, BP, you have 24 hours to take care of this, or I'm firing your finance section chief, or I am going to federalize this part of the incident. And fortunately, they got it done. You know, so strong personalities are needed in that case. And I think you're right. People don't realize what the authorities are there.
they don't realize what their authorities are, and, we've got this black plume of smoke and
Oh,
19,000 pounds of Freon on
yeah,
board.
yeah,
And although under normal circumstances, as you know, as an industrial hygienist,
yeah,
Freon is non-flammable, non-toxic, but at high temperatures, it breaks down, right?
yeah, yeah.
And when it breaks those chemical bonds, who the hell knows what's in that? And the
Right,
smoke cloud is rolling into a neighborhood. You
right,
know, it's
right,
uh it's a much
right.
bigger issue. I brought CTH in to do community air monitoring. We had the
Oh, yeah, I'm
EPA
familiar
doing
with those
community air
guys. Yeah,
monitoring. Yeah,
yeah, great group.
right.
Yeah, I
So
worked with them, on a couple of exercises in California where we had some, oils with high BTXs, benzene, xylene, toluene, stuff like that. Great group of guys.
yeah, you got to get the right monitors.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
most
yeah.
of the meters that we're working in, they'll do LEL and oxygen, hydrogen sulfide, carbon monoxide, and
Right.
some total hydrocarbons. But once you kind of get out of that zone, you need different equipment, and
Yeah,
you know
that's exactly right. And I think there's a lot of, I don't know, it's changed, right? Since, I mean, in 2012 was when I left, And I feel like there's been some changes, and sometimes people, not just the Coast Guard, EPA, whatever, they get caught in this idea partnerships are more important than the actual mission. But when you're dealing with public health issues like you just described, that's not true anymore. You've got to be able. The mission in that case is to protect the public, and then, as you know, the environment and security if there's a security issue. And we can't sacrifice at the stake of trying to maintain a partnership. That ain't right. So
Well, I had a great experience with the Pacific Strike Team on the Genius Star 11. The strike team came up, and uh, uh, Lieutenant Hart, we made him. We decided that community air monitoring, because it was so important. Um, uh, it was the relationship with the community that was the most challenging part of the response, because
yes,
the ship wasn't burning anymore.
right.
And so we decided to make community air monitoring a branch of its own, and made the
Mhm.
lieutenant the branch director, and
Awesome.
he would then report out on that, and it worked really well. And they did.
Yeah,
We still brought in a contractor. We brought in GHD to provide additional monitoring, and so the Coast Guard had monitoring, the city had some monitoring, the salvage company had some monitoring, but we put it all under the branch director and made the strike team leader that branch director. And I think it gave it a ton of credibility.
yeah. Good on you. That's an excellent tactic. And I took that a step further. I was involved in a dump fire on an Indian reservation, the Tonawanda Indian Reservation, working for EPA. And we had this cloud going across the city of Buffalo because Buffalo is furious, and we put that same unit together. But then at some point, I said, "Look, we are getting calls about complaints." And then EPA would say, "Well, there's no cloud. It's not possible." I said, "Wait a minute. To the people, they think something's going on. Let's send a team out there with meters and strike team clothing and say, look, there's nothing happening." And some people would say that's a waste of resources. It's not. We work for the public. All of us do, whether it's contractors or the responsible party or what I like to refer to as the owner of vessels and facilities now. We all work together, and we're trying to serve the public and the environment. Let's do that. And I called it the ambulatory response air monitoring team. And so we got a call, we sent somebody out there, and then it was good. We didn't have any media problems and so on and so forth. But they saw a strike team guy. Yeah, look at this, nothing on my meter. So you'll be safe. Call us if you have any other issues. But good on you. That's a great tech.
I mean, zeros are an important number to document, right? I mean,
Right.
that is, that's the best number. And
Yeah.
that's why we do fence line monitoring. And
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
um you know
Yeah.
when I first put the contract that Wismic has together with CTH, I was
Yeah.
talking to a good friend of mine who uses them. I'm like, man, they're so expensive. They're so expensive. But he's like, yeah, but you'll know when you need them, and by the time you need them, you're not going to care what it costs,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you'll know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And as I'm walking off the dock in Tacoma because of the smoke, I'm like, yeah, he's right. I need them right now, right now. That's when I
That's
need
right.
them.
That's right.
So, but that's tactics. One of
Yeah.
the interviews that I saw you do on C-SPAN was it wasn't really a town hall meeting. It was more of a, I don't know, almost like a fair, really,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
where you set up tables or booths with information. There were some great graphics for dispersants and burning and
Yeah.
and whatnot. Tell me about how you decided to do that and what that accomplished.
Well, I got roasted at my first three public meetings. And when I started to look at that, I said, this doesn't make any sense. We have a microphone in a center room. You got all the people in the front responsible for the incident. And think of it this way: you have high outrage going on, right? High outrage. And I thought, this makes no sense. The people want the opportunity to say what they need to say. But at the same time, let's teach them something. So we went for the model of, them just lining up, just bashing the heck out of us and not being able to give them the right answers. Two, let's diffuse some of that anger and see if we can. All right, you have an issue with dispersants, there's our dispersant people over there. If you have an issue with, how much oil recovering over there, if you're worried about birds in the community over there, if you want some claims over there. And what happened was it kind of, the people that actually come there to learn something, which is the majority of the audience, by the way, are actually learning something. Now, what I call the screamers and yellers, they're still going to be there, but now the focus, it disperses some of their anxiety and concern. And it's important to be able to think of that. I often get, hey, we had this flood, like where I live in Montana and Missoula, they had all these floods. And they had these people, hey, we know you're an expert. We want to have a town hall meeting. I said, don't do it. Why do you want to have a town hall meeting when you have high outrage? It makes no sense. Do an expo. That's what I call it. Do an expo, and they fuse that. And if they have an issue, well, we heard this. Okay, well, over there is you know, and don't set up a microphone in the middle of the room. You know, if the cameras are rolling and somebody's yelling at you, I had an incident, a situation. There was this woman. She looked just like Kathy Bates. Oh my goodness! She comes into the town hall, starts screaming at the fish are dying. And I said, well, where? I want to know. And I was sincere. Where are these fish? You know where they are. I said, no, I don't. Over there, I've got a map of when I'd like to take you over there. Well, she just kept going on and on. It made her look like a fool. And I never saw that aired anywhere because I was able to say, I got the experts right here and there's a map over there. And happy to walk over there and let's mark that place. And tomorrow we'll take a look at that area. So the expo needs to be the way we go. If we have high outrage, sometimes you don't have a high outrage. Sometimes you have just people wanting to know what's happening. And I call these people high situational awareness, right? They want that information. Example that at Santa Barbara, right? So Santa Barbara, when I came back for a little break, said, hey, can you come up? I got a lot of concerned citizens worried about a Deepwater Horizon happening here. That's high concern, not outrage. So then we went back to the town hall model where they could come up and talk about things, and we did presentations. So high, that's different. That's high interest, not low outrage. You could have that traditional town hall meeting, but if you have high outrage anywhere, don't do a town hall meeting. Do an expo.
How do you work with your PIO, and how do you go about selecting a PIO? How
Yeah,
important is a PIO to you?
yeah. So I don't know if you've been familiar. If you saw my TED talk about the hand model, right? And you got yourself in the middle, you got your responders, you got your incident, you got your boss, and you got your stakeholders, and the pinky is your media. You got to succeed in all of those, right? So I mean, the PIO. Here's the deal. I think, okay, and this is absolutely true. And PIOs, I'll argue this to give me a call. I'll argue this to death. The American people don't want the truth. They want the right answer. Okay, they want the right answer. When I get there in Deepwater Horizon, they don't want to hear about unified command and working with the BP and because that looked like we were in bed with the arsonist. Now this is not BP was wonderful, okay, but what they wanted was somebody large and in charge, and that's what I was. You heard me say 51% of the vote. This is what we're doing. We're here. We're going to clean up that oil, and I'm in charge. 51%. I was using the area contingency plan model. And I told BP, you need to stay away from the camera. Let me do your work for you by being the front of this incident. And for the longest time, we would say things like, we have tools in the toolbox. That's that's not what you want. The American people don't want to hear that. They want to hear weapons in the arsenal. It's like the old Patton-esque approach to things. And so to me, the PIO, like I said, that mission of the PIO is as critical as the cleaning up the oil, as critical. So I said, your job is to make sure, that we're doing the right things, communicate the right things for the American people. That's what they want to hear. what people need in deep water is a sense of confidence of two things. One, that the oil is going to clean up, and two, more importantly, that their way of life is being restored. And that's the mindset I changed. The message was down there was, we're going to stay here till the last oil's cleaned up. And I said, no, 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 that's not good enough. We're here to save your way of life. That's the motto. And that's the emphasis I want to put on there. I fired a lot of PIOs. To me, I think we make a mistake that everything has to be reviewed by the incident commander. I don't have time for that. So I want a PIO I can trust, that's carrying the message forward, that's making sense to all of this. I remember when President Obama came down and we asked him what his objectives were. One of them was, let's get this whole operation off the front page of the Washington Post. No, for all of us, not just for me, but for all of us. And you know what? That's a really good strategic objective. And I think that gets accomplished when the PIO is really stepping up and communicating the right things. And I'm not saying they're dishonest, right? None of it's dishonest, but what the American people want to hear. So,
Well,
yeah,
some of those, statements that you made, oh, we're gonna, we're taking responsibility, we're going to stay here till the oil's cleaned up. I mean, that,
yeah,
we hear that in every exercise, in every, press conference and whatnot. And I do wonder whether or not, we plan for a press conference at every drill, and I do wonder whether that's an outdated model in today's high-paced social media kind of world.
yeah,
There was that oil spill down in Southern California. I don't remember
yes,
who the spiller was, but it was
yep,
where I think there was a ship that dragged anchor over the pipeline,
yes, that's right.
right?
Yep. I remember that. Yep.
Um, and there was a lot of outrage from the
Yep.
media because they would hold these press conferences and then they wouldn't answer any questions,
Nope.
right? They
Nope.
wouldn't take questions, and they didn't explain themselves well, and um, you just got to wonder, are you just calling a press conference because that was the next item on the checklist?
Right.
um
I think
why are
yeah.
you doing it?
No, I agree 100%. I mean, there are situations where, I said, why are we doing it? Where's the demand? If we want to inform the people, let's do these expos. If the media wants answers, what answers are they looking for? Oftentimes you do this drill. Why don't you take the person off the street and stick them in the audience? We never do. We always have reporters there. But what do the people think? There's this process called risk communications, and Dan, I had the opportunity to write a paper on this at the War College, and actually won first prize at the War College and second place in the National Defense Writing Competition. And it talks about specifically risk communications. And risk communications is different than public affairs. Risk communications is connecting with the people, understanding what their issues are, instead of looking at people as a media problem, looking at them as sort of your spokesperson. And once you build that relationship up, and you're going to see a big change. And the media high ground is not CNN and Fox; it's the local media. We focus on it. I don't care what CNN and Fox thinks at the end of the day. At the end of the day, what does the Missoula, Tribune think? This is where I live, about how I responded to the incident, because this is local and this is where our people live. So I agree. We need to change that format, and we need to get people in the audience so the message is getting across the way we want it to. So yeah, I think the wrong objective is being looked at there. The thing when I first got there, okay, here's a new guy. What's he going to do? And I said, I was here for Hurricane Katrina, and I helped save 33,000 lives. Now I'm here to save your way of life. You see how strong that message is? Instead of the media guy saying up there, well, on April 13th, blah, 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 just reading facts, it doesn't help. It doesn't help. The people want to hear that somebody's in charge and that there's a connection there between them and that individual.
Is that crisis communications paper that you wrote something that you can share? I'd love to read it.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. The CDC has a really good risk communications a handbook. I think you can maybe even get it for free, but the problem is they don't follow it.
Oh, right. Well, that's the thing, right?
Yeah, but I know. I think yeah, I'd be happy to share it
It's
with you.
another book, a book on the
Yeah,
shelf, and no one's read it.
nobody's. I have, but you're right. It's just another thing on the shelf, and it's just we missed the boat on what people are thinking about. And I'll give you another tool that worked for me that I was taught long ago. It's called the Koch principle. And when you communicate people, they're like Coke, COKE. C stands for commitment, O stands for openness, K is knowledge, and E is for empathy. So, if you have a high outraged public, you want to deal with, not commitment, but openness and empathy, right? That's what you want to tell people. If they want to know, are you committed to doing something? You can use the commitment thing, but if you're using commitment and knowledge against somebody who's looking for some empathy and openness, it's like what I call billboarding. Here's a billboard. It's not effective at all, you know. And that's where we, as respondents, kind of need to change our mindset as far as that goes. So the screamers, I embraced them. I said, "Hey, go for a walk. Let's talk a little bit. What's going on? I'm so angry about that." There was a woman called Kim Chauvin. She was down in Deepwater Horizon. She claimed her entire family was getting sick from dispersants, and so she goes up to the dispersant booth, and they're explaining to her the science, and that's not working. And I walk over there and said, "What's going on, man?" When she goes, and she's screaming. I said, "I'll tell you what. Here's what we're gonna do. You come to my command post tomorrow, and I'm gonna hook you up with some scientists, and we're gonna get to the bottom of this and make sure your family's not getting sick." I can tell she was wrong. I made that connection. Guess what? She was one of our biggest spokesperson for the incident.
Really?
Openness, right? Empathy versus, all right, here's all the facts. That can't be happening. There's no way. We haven't been dispersing here boats. That's no way that can happen. Even if it happened, you wouldn't get sick like that. She don't want to hear that.
I remember
She wants to hear somebody cares. Right.
we had
Yeah.
people in Baton Rouge who said that people were dropping dispersants on their houses, right? All right.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
And I
Yeah.
remember I remember a guy being interviewed. I watched this on TV. I watched it a couple times, and he's yelling in the microphone. He's like, "I got benzene poisoning in my kidneys. I got benzene in my liver." What is going on? It's like, no, you don't.
No, you don't.
All right. Man, benzene's water soluble. That there's no benzene once it hit the surface, right? We hear,
Yeah,
right?
right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
I mean, if you've been standing at the gas stations, huffing,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
then,
Yep.
but
Yep. Yeah,
that's
you're
where you got
absolutely
it. You got it
yeah.
in your garage from all that old gas that's being stored. You didn't
Right.
get it from this, right?
No. No, you're right. You're right. Yeah.
So did you decide on your own that you were going to use the statement, "Hey, I'm in charge. I have 51% of the vote"? Did you talk to the Coast Guard attorneys before you said that, or was that all you?
Yeah, no, you know Admiral Allen very well, and he and I had a really good talk before I got there. He was really my. There were federal coordinators at the area command, but he wanted to sit down with me personally. He said, "Listen, we have lost the confidence of the American public. Everything you look to up to that time, you hear over and again the messages, BPA is our partner, BPA is our partner," which is true. But what they wanted was somebody to come down and say that the Coast Guard has the authority. And I never bashed BP when I said that. And a lot of people accuse me, "Oh, you bashed BP." I said, "Never did." I said, "We are in charge. We have," and I repeated that message over again. And that's where I kind of got it. Now, I had a meeting with my instant commander counterpart because we had unified command. I said, "Listen, I got to do this." And he got a little bit disgruntled at first. I said, "No, no, it doesn't affect anything. It doesn't affect our partnership. It doesn't affect unified command. It's that messaging that's getting out there." And I really think that, depending on the outrage level against the responsible party, sometimes best for the responsible party to sit back and let, the Coast Guard or not the EPA, but the Coast Guard. I hope some EPA friends don't kick in. But you know what I mean? Somebody in authority up front and actually giving a good talk of what's happening on. Our PIO is our sheriff here in Missoula County, and he's had all the training. Well, what better person to put up front on that microphone? And he's well known, he's very popular and respected. So when he gets up there and he says something, people are going to believe him. They know he's in charge. Could be a wildfire, could be anything, flood. But when he gets up there, it really instills that confidence. But to answer your question, yeah, that came from the upper echelons, including the White House. Are we in charge? That was the question the president kept asking. I said, yeah, we have 51% of the vote. We are responsible for ensuring that an adequate response is happening, as you know from the NCP. So yeah, that was the messaging that we had to change. And at one point, they said only Admiral Allen and Roger LaFerriere can talk to the media, because we were the only ones presenting from the Coast Guard that were presenting that common picture. And if
Were you there all the
yeah, that's it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Were you there all the way to the end? Were you there until they?
No, I left after
well?
it got capped. After it got capped, I left. I'm a battlefront kind of commander. You know what I mean? You have the Pattons that get in there and they clean house and whatever, and then you have the guys that are falling behind Patton, right? They run the campaign, and that's the guy. I'm the bridgehead guy. So I go in there and I do my thing. Okay, now after it's capped, we move into the campaign mode. So let's bring in somebody else. And I think I'm not the right personality for the campaign mode. I'm the right personality to get things moving in a way that we can get in the campaign mode for an incident.
So you're like the scene in the Patton movie where he says, "I can attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours."
Right.
I can pivot my whole army and be in Bastogne in 48 hours.
Yeah, 48 hours. That's right. That's right.
Montgomery's like, no, you can't. It's like, yeah, I can.
Yeah. I mean, he got in trouble with the media, and I didn't slap anybody. But
no, you did.
I felt like I wanted to. Let me just tell you. Anyways,
no, you didn't slap anybody.
I didn't slap anybody.
But you fired some people.
Oh, I fired quite a bit. When I teach ICS, I tell people during Katrina, I fired 5 situation unit leaders until I got to the right one. What more important thing is the situation unit leader, right? I mean, this is where the information officer gets his information. It's where the incident commander gets his information. It's where, the liaison gets his information. Ops, I mean, the situation unit, we underappreciate that position. And, and it wasn't that they were bad people. They just couldn't get their arms around the enormity of that incident. And finally, I got somebody, a young lieutenant, who just took it by the horns. And, you could walk up to him and say, "Where's the Coast Guard cutter, Dolphin?" And he would tell you right there, and that's the kind of people you need. And it's the same, the other thing is, and this, negativity is a poison you can't have on a command post. You can't. I said I gave one warning, and then the second, you're gone. You can't. It's a disease. It's like a cancer. So I would walk around like any good leader would, and I'd hear this guy talking. "What are you doing? Why are you talking negative? Everything's screwed up. I don't need that. I need to hear for a positive attitude. That's what's going to get us through it." And then if I heard him again, he was gone. So you've got to have the leadership ability to relieve them. Fire is kind of a strong word, but you got to get them out of there. And when I was trying to gain the hearts and minds of the people in the government down there, I put a liaison officer in each EOC on all the coastal communities, and one with every mayor and one with every parish president. And I said, if I hear anything negative about you, you're gone. And there were a few that had to leave because they said things that weren't appropriate. So, and that's a commitment you make, and then suddenly they're on your side, and they're like, "Wow, yeah, this LaFerriere guy, he's serious about this." So,
all right.
Yeah.
Well, we should probably wrap this up. We've been doing it for a while. I might even chop this up into a couple of episodes. Is there a final thought or comment that you would like to share before we wrap it up? And do you want to share any contact information? You have your own business. If somebody wants to reach out to you, are you interested in a call?
Yeah, sure. It's pretty simple. It's Roger LaFerriere and Incorporated, and my number is 406-407-9999. 3562. And, I'm available for consultation a lot of times. I think that's what I do mostly, right? And, just give me a call, and it's a simple thing. I won't charge you, but if it's a little more detailed, I will. But I want everybody to succeed in the world we work in, because every incident is personal. I'll leave you with that. Every incident involves relationship. Somebody the documentation now on the mental health effects from Katrina and the oil spills is just growing and growing. And so we have an obligation, all of us, to do the best we can to respond. So I think that's important that people know that. And so I'd be helpful to assist anybody that can. I do some plans. I do a lot of exercise development. I do a lot of online ICS training. Zoom type or whatever. I usually have to get a team together for that. And then finally, last but not least, Dan, take care of yourself. Center of the pond.
Roger LaFerriere, U.S. Coast Guard Captain retired, incident commander, battle leader. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Well, thanks, Dan. I really appreciate the opportunity. You take care of yourself. Thank you.